Okay, then let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the final session of Barkfest. It's a real pleasure to have you here. You probably know by now, but I'm Zazie Todd. I'm the author of WAG, The Science of Making Your Dog Happy, Per, The Science of Making Your Cat Happy, and my new book, Bark, The Science of Helping Your Anxious, Fearful, or Reactive Dog, which was the impetus for Barkfest. And it's what we're talking about today. I'm joined, as always, by my friend and colleague, Christy Benson, who you probably know as co-host from the Positive Posting Conversation, our podcast, but she is also a Northern anthropologist, an amazing dog trainer, and a staff member at the Academy for Dog Trainers. Hi, Christy.
Hello, good morning.
And hi to all of our audience. It's great to see you're already telling us where you're from, which is all over the place, which is amazing. Thank you. And we're going to pause it in a moment for a photo, as usual. But just to let you know, Bark, The Science of Helping Your Anxious, Fearful, or Reactive Dog is out next week on Tuesday if you're in the USA, Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. But if you're in the UK, you have to wait until October the 17th, but that's not too far away either, and you can pre-order it. And it will be available from all good bookstores. So we'll just pause for a moment for a photo, and as usual, you can type your questions in the Q&A for us to get to at the end. Great, thank you. And you can always get it from the recording if you didn't get it now. So I'm going to turn over to Christy to ask me some questions about Bark.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Zazie. I'm really looking forward to this. So first up, we're going to be talking about your new book, Bark, and how it can help people with anxious and fearful dogs. And I think that's a constituency of dogs that really needs as much help as we can provide. So I love that there's this book out. But let's start with Barkfest. How did this come about?
It came about because I was wanting to do something for my book. I wanted to do an online event for my book. And the thing is that when I started asking, I asked some fellow authors if they would like to take part in a joint event with me, and more people said yes than I expected. It was amazing. I was really pleased. And also I asked in an author group that I'm a member of and a couple of places and said, is there anyone who wants to do a joint event? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a non-fiction book. It could be anything about dogs or in fact pets. And after a few people had got back to me, I thought this is actually worth turning into something big. And so I started approaching a few people to see if they would want to attend. And I've been thrilled by it, actually. I've really enjoyed all of the conversations with all of our authors. I think they've been amazing. And it's just been fantastic. The audience has been fantastic. And I'm just delighted that so many people agreed to take part. And I think there isn't anything else like this. So it's been a really special event to do, and I've just enjoyed it from start to finish, and I'm so grateful to everyone who's helped to make it happen.
Yeah, it has been absolutely hilarious and fun and meaningful. But it's also just been a lot. It's been, I can't believe you pulled this together. So many authors, so many conversations, so many great questions. So when I was, you asked me to come up with some questions for you about Bark, which I love doing because I love pulling information out of you about the stuff that you write about. And I found myself going back and forth between, because this is a literature festival, it's a literary festival, going back and forth between questions about your writing process and your thinking process as you came up with this book, and then also questions about dogs and dog science. So first of all, how do you counsel people that slow is the new fast when it comes to helping fearful dogs?
That's the really important thing, because you have to go at the dog's pace, and we're always talking about how you have to go at the dog's pace, but it's really hard for people to get that, and we always want to go faster and what we think will be the dog's pace, which is often an absolute snail's pace. And the most important thing is that the dog always has to feel safe. When your dog is fearful or anxious, your job as their guardian is to protect them and to help them feel safe. And so you really do sometimes have to go very slowly in the training. So I've got a lot of detail about technique in the book, because the technique is really important and you can get that in there. But I've also got some really nice stories, not just about my own pets, but other people have kindly let me tell stories about their dog. And one of the examples in the book, I'm very lucky to have been able to share the story of Bonnie Hartney's dog, Dixie. who was incredibly fearful as a young puppy, so right from the very, very beginning. And she tells the story. It's a really beautiful story of the work that she's done and the difference it's made. But also you can tell from what she says that this is something that's taken years, and she talks about the progress of each year being better than the previous year. And I think that really helps to bring it home, because it's one thing to know it intellectually, and it's another thing to actually see it or to hear it told about in a story. And I think that helps to make it better, really easier for people to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the stories. I love the story components of the book for sure. So when you were talking about good technique, and I think that leads us into our next question quite nicely. Did you start out with a particular idea of how much of the why, and sorry, the citrus barking there, how much of the why and how much of the how? Like, I think you do a good job of saying, why do we do it like this, and what's going on in the dog's mind, but also here's how to help specifically. So did you start out with an idea, or did that kind of just flow?
I started with an idea for the structure of the book, which is that I was thinking there are lots of things that apply to different kinds of fearful and anxious dogs, or different kinds of fears, really, which are the same. And so I wanted to include those together in the first part of the book before going into the detail of more specific problems like reactivity or resource guarding or separation related issues, for example. So I wanted to do that. And I knew going in that I really wanted to get something that would get the technique right, because I think there aren't many places that have that. There are some really good resources for fearful and anxious dogs, but I wanted to write something that brought the science into it, that was very up to date on the science. And I didn't think there was anything else like that out there. So I've tried to make it very scientific, but very easy to understand and full of practical tips so that people can really use the information. And really a lot of it came from conversations that I had with people about their fearful and anxious dogs, and trying to help them. So a lot of it came from that, and from suggestions that other people gave me, or just questions that people came to me with as well.
Right, yeah, absolutely. I remember speaking with you about this, I guess it was a couple years ago, it seems. Yeah. So when it comes to technique, there is a lot of repetitions that are needed if you're doing operant conditioning and also classical conditioning. And some people find that the sort of the repetitions and the mechanics of doing this type of training is somehow, it feels coercive to them, despite the fact that coercion has a specific different meaning. So how can we help educate people about how gentle and important good technique are, and how important good training is to helping dogs live their safest, best, most comfortable, joyful life?
I love that question. And I think the thing is, if you don't do the things that are going to help your dog, the chances are that they will unfortunately keep getting worse, because they will be exposed to things that they are afraid of, and that will just make them sensitize and get worse. So I think part of the message is that you have to do something. It's your job to help your dog as much as you can. So you do have to do something. And these techniques, really, they are very kind. They are humane. And there's actually quite a big section in the book about the kinds of training methods that unfortunately will make dogs worse, and the kinds of training methods that we use, which are kind and humane and which will help because they're reward based. And I mean, yes, your dog has to eat, but you have to pick the right treats to help, or whatever is going to help your dog. And one of the ways I actually like to talk about classical conditioning is to think about making a big surprise for your dog. And there is a technical term, if you're looking at the science, there's this thing called an expectancy violation happening in your brain, which is what you want to achieve. But really, that's a really nice big surprise, a positive surprise, and a fun thing to happen. So even if you're working with a very fearful dog, the training should be at a level that is fun for the dog and comfortable for the dog. And you should be able to see that in their body language, basically.
Perfect. Talking about operant conditioning leads us into talking about the tricks training. So at the beginning of Barkfest, you asked our wonderful colleague, Erica Beckwith, who works for A Matter of Manners Dog Training, to run a tricks class, a Zoom tricks class, as part of Barkfest for those of for the authors who were participating. So, which was hilarious, and I loved it. So, how and why do you talk about trick training in a book about fearful and anxious dogs?
Yeah, that was a wonderful tricks class. I was so grateful to Erica for teaching it, and the authors came and did it, and some companion animal psychology subscribers to my email list had the chance to come and join us too. And it was so much fun. And of course, this wasn't specifically for fearful dogs. But the thing is that fearful dogs need enrichment as well. They need things to do. And fear can often get in the way of activities that you might like to do. So you might not be able to take your fearful dog for a lovely long hike or to sit on a patio or something. But tricks can be really helpful. And there's something that you can do at home. Actually, there are lots of activities these days that you can do at home with your dog on Zoom, which makes life much easier. So there's a section in the book about providing enrichment, because enrichment is important. It's one of the central tenets of animal welfare and what we call the 5 domains model, which follows on from the 5 freedoms, which I'm sure everyone in the audience has heard of. But one of the central tenets of that is that you have to be providing positive experiences for your dog for good welfare. And that's a real challenge when your dog is fearful, because if they're so fearful, they can't take part in it. But tricks training, it's a fun thing to do. It takes the pressure off you as the dog trainer. And Erica Beckwith spoke to me for the book, and a few other trainers spoke to me for the book as well, about activities that are good to do with the dog that you can't take out and about in the world. So you can still do something fun. And also, the tricks can turn out to be helpful in situations where your dog is perhaps a little bit nervous, or you think they might be a little bit nervous. And you can just ask them to do some of the tricks and give them rewards, and it will help to keep them distracted and help them to have a positive experience in that situation. So tricks training actually can be really helpful. And a trick can be anything that you want to teach them.
Right. Yeah. I love the phrase "it's all tricks to dogs" when we're doing positive reinforcement training, you know. So I think that is a useful way to look at it. And the idea of having a class on Zoom and things that you can do with your dog at home to keep them safe leads us nicely, I think, into our next question. So the question and the need to keep other beings safe, both dogs and people. So if you have a dog who's fearful and reactive, the dogs and cats and people around this dog need to be kept safe as well. And this is a big question, and it's a complicated question. So what factors do people need to consider, and why can our very human emotions get it wrong?
I think human emotions often make us get it wrong because we think we know the dog, and so we don't think that there's going to be anything that might go wrong from our perspective. We expect the dog to tolerate us or to like us, and they don't necessarily, of course. And if a dog is fearful or anxious, then if they're backed into a corner, they might actually be aggressive. And if we're not very good at reading dogs' body language, we might not see the signs that build up to that. So it's important for us to keep our dogs feeling safe, but also the people around the dog being safe. And that can sometimes be as simple as putting barriers in the home so that people can't approach the dog, making sure that any visitors to the home don't go and approach your fearful dog, but your dog has somewhere safe to go. And it's a good idea for every dog, but especially a fearful dog, to have a safe space, which is somewhere that they can go, where they won't be disturbed. They can go whenever they want. You will never pull them out of it. So it could be a crate, but it can't be a crate that you send them to. It has to be somewhere that they go to at specific times. So if you have a crate that you send them to, but you want a crate to be their safe space, well, then you need a second crate to be that safe space. And I spoke to Professor Daniel Mills for the book, and he told me that actually for some of the dogs that he works with, and bearing in mind that he works with dogs with really quite severe problems sometimes, he said for some of those dogs, simply giving them a safe space and making sure that everybody in the household recognizes it over a few weeks, that can sometimes be enough to really make a huge difference to the dog and to their behavior. So that's really good to know. So the dog safety is really, I would say it's essential. It's a need, and it's a feeling of being safe. So if the dog is afraid of things that we don't understand why they're afraid of it, that doesn't matter. We just have to recognize that the dog is afraid, and so we have to do what we can to help them.
Right. Perfect. Yeah. So you do mention pandemic puppies in the book, or the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on dogs. So is this pandemic puppies, is that a real thing? And if so, what effect did it have on the dogs and their families?
It is a real thing. So in the pandemic, a whole load of people rushed out to get dogs. and circumstances were quite different. So if people got puppies during the pandemic, it will have varied a little bit depending on where people lived, because I think each country's or state or province's pandemic experience was slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
But for a long period of time, people couldn't actually socialize their puppy. They couldn't take them to puppy class, or if they could, they maybe didn't feel safe to go. So they didn't want to. So that meant that there's a whole kind of generation of puppies that missed out on socialization during the sensitive period, which is from 3 until 12 to 14 weeks. And that's a really important time. So we would expect that to cause problems. And we've had anecdotal reports of people saying there are more dogs with fears and anxieties as a result. But there is also now some research, especially from the Royal Veterinary College in the UK, which looks at that. And it found that it's not just the lack of socialization. It also is the case that the people who went out and got puppies during the pandemic didn't necessarily do as much research as people normally would, or you might hope they would. Many more of them were actually first-time dog guardians, so they maybe didn't know as much. So to some extent also it might be that people didn't know what they needed to do as much, and everyone was distracted by other things, so they were less likely to probably to go and find out what they should do. So it does seem that there is this group of dogs who, through no fault of anyone, have ended up not being properly socialized and unfortunately having increased fear and anxiety as a result. And it's something we need more research on, but it does seem to be a real phenomenon.
A coming together of first-time dog owner and a dog that's maybe not socialized as a pet is sort of a unfortunate happenstance there.
Yeah.
So I know you did your PhD writing about metaphor, right? If I remember right.
Yeah.
And I love hearing you talk about metaphor. So when I was reading your book, I was thinking, I always think about metaphor in your writing. And then I started to think about metaphors and allegories and what's the difference. I actually Googled allegory because I had a vague idea, but I was like, what is allegory? What's the difference between metaphor and allegory? So do you make use of both metaphors and allegories in your writing? What's the difference between these two as sort of a literary tool? And what do you think they can contribute to writing about dogs? And I know this is like a super fierce question, but I'm really looking forward to your answer.
So allegory is using a story to talk about something abstract, and it might often be used to talk about something political. So it could be used to talk about something political that you don't want to say directly, but you want to give an example. That would be one way in which allegory is used. And metaphor. So metaphor is really interesting because we think of metaphor as a literary device in which you're comparing one thing to another, but actually metaphor is something cognitive, by which I mean it's something that helps to structure how we think about things in our brains, basically. So it's not just a literary device, it's something that structures our everyday thinking. And that would be with a whole, like you can group metaphors together into what I would call a cognitive metaphor. So if we're thinking specifically about dogs and some of the metaphors that people might use there, so there's this, I call it a metaphor of dogs as wolf pack. And of course, dogs are not actually wolves. Dogs and wolves share the same ancestors, but wolves are quite different. And so a lot of old-fashioned thinking about dogs is using that wolf pack metaphor, which is really unfortunate because regardless of how well wolves actually behave, somehow in this metaphor, it encourages people to think of old-fashioned way of making dogs do things rather than asking dogs to do things, whereas we can contrast that to dogs as family. Now, dogs literally are family, but some people might talk about dogs as children. And again, that's metaphorical. They're not literally children, but that will shape the way that people think about them. So metaphor is really important in terms of how we think about things. And I guess the way I thought about it most was in terms of how to explain some of the really complicated science that's like the psychological literature is really complex and really hard to understand, and trying to think of ways to distill that down. So this idea of a surprise, linguistically, I enjoyed thinking about ways to talk about the terminology of classical conditioning, which we kind of need to know. People are kind of familiar with because everyone's heard about Pavlov, but we are always talking about a CS and a US, and even dog trainers will talk about to their clients. And it's kind of, it helps you to understand the things that you're talking about. But I've been writing about the CS as the thing that's considered scary, because I find a lot of people get confused, like, what's the CS, what's the US, what do I do? And the US is the ultimate snack. or it might be an unanticipated sausage or something like that. So I had a lot of fun thinking of US phrasings that we could use that would kind of summarize the idea that we want the dog to be having a wonderful time. Like the thing that's considered scary happens, we have to give them the ultimate snack so that they have their wonderful party. So that's one of the ways in which I've used linguistic devices in there. So the ultimate snack, I think, is the best way to put it, but you can also specify it as a sausage or salmon or whatever you can make work. Sardine, an unanticipated sardine, for example.
I love that phrasing.
Thank
That's
you.
perfect. And CS and US are such clunky, hard to remember terminology. I think it's unfortunate that we were sort of saddled with that, I think.
Yeah, and we're stuck with it because these are historical terms that have been around for a long time. It turns out they were not translated very well originally from Pavlov. Um,
Mm,
and we're still kind of stuck with them. And I think apparently it should have been conditional stimulus instead of conditioned, and that does make more sense, but it's still a bit clunky, and
yeah.
scientific terminology can be quite hard to understand, so it's really important to have ways to talk about this in ordinary language instead.
Oh, for sure. I mean, dog trainers need to understand and learn those terms, but yeah. So, one of the really important sort of ways that dog trainers help fearful and anxious dogs is to talk about management. So, short term changes to the dog's environment that will help the dog feel better right away. So, management solutions for a fearful dog can be a real lifesaver, and dramatically increase the comfort of the dog and the dog's welfare. And sometimes these solutions can be the whole solution. You know, we don't even need to do any more training in some cases if we just make a few changes to the dog's environment. And sometimes that a management solution doesn't sort of decrease the welfare of the dog overall. But sometimes management solutions can actually be a problem if they're allowed to sort of just continue as the whole solution forever. So can you talk about this? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so I mean, if you have a reactive dog, for example, one of the management things you can do is to stop taking them for walks for a while. Or a lot of people might just find times of day when it's quieter. But if you're not taking your dog, that can sometimes be a really helpful thing to do. If you're not taking your dog for a walk, but you still need to find some kind of enrichment for them. Otherwise, it would be a problem because they still need activities to do. They still need some kind of exercise, even if it's more for their brain, but than physically. So they still need something, and that's where the tricks training might come in that we talked about earlier. Another one would be if you have a dog who is somewhat afraid of other dogs, but actually would kind of like to play with them. Play is just a natural behavior for dogs. And so it's really important for us to provide opportunities for dogs to engage in natural behaviors. And I think some dogs, unfortunately, they just never get those opportunities because something went wrong early on. And so it's a bit kind of difficult for people to do. But there are ways, and the dog trainer can help you find ways in which many dogs could learn how to play with other dogs, or at least to play with dogs that they know and that they are friends with. And that's very different from going to a dog park and having to meet random dogs, which can be some dogs is great, but for some dogs it's really quite a scary experience. So you have to think about what your dog needs and ways in which you can provide it for them. And management often is incredibly helpful to keep your dog feeling safe. But at the same time as doing that, you have to make sure that you're meeting your dog's needs too.
Perfect. I love it. So in all of your books, you use your own companion animals, your own pets, as sort of one of the ways that you like to talk about what you're teaching us. So how important was Pepper, who I think appeared for the first time in this book? So how important was Pepper for your writing process for this book?
So Pepper is my Shih Tzu, who is a senior. He was 10 when we adopted him, so he's 13 and a half now. And you're right, this is the first time he appears in one of those books. So obviously he appears in stories, but in terms of the process, also it's just really helpful in terms of literally physically sitting at my computer and then needing a break because Pepper does not walk very far. He only has very little legs. He only walks really short distances, but he is happy to have very frequent walks. So that's really good. So I can get to a point where I think, oh, I need a break. Pepper's there. He would love to go outside just for 10 minutes or something. So he really helped kind of physically by being there and wanting to go for short walks, and they're very slow. So I end up standing around outside, Pepper sniffing the grass. I've got time to think, and it just helps. Like if I'm stuck on something in the writing, that short little break can often be enough to help me when I come back to the computer, just sit down and I've got an answer, or at least I've got somewhere to get started again. So he was really helpful. And plus he's just very cute and very cuddly and very good at being a companion. That's his favorite thing, is just to be a companion. So very helpful indeed.
No. And isn't there research that talks about how getting, and I know you live in quite a wild area, right, with a lot of greenery and trees. So isn't there some research that says like participating in that kind of environment is really helpful for humans?
There is, yes, and the Japanese call it forest bathing as well. But I think just spending any time in nature is good for people. So I'm very lucky to live in a place where we have a lot of green around us, and it is a little bit wild. But also exercise. There's a lot of research on exercise now. I don't count my walks with Pepper as exercise particularly, but at least I'm moving and moving my legs. And there's
Right.
research that shows that just a 10-minute walk can help to improve someone's mood as well, and is good for people. So yeah,
Mm.
those little breaks are really helpful for me, and I know that Pepper enjoys them because he goes and he sniffs and he sniffs and he sniffs, and he really loves it. And I just let him follow his nose, and sometimes I throw treats in the grass for him to find. And if there's a person coming or a dog coming who he'd like to meet, he gets to meet them. But if there's a big dog coming and I'm not sure about them, then he just gets picked up or taken away. So he doesn't have any scary experiences out there, you know. So it's just nice and fun.
Yeah, little dude. Um, so I think because you now have three published books, you've developed a bit of an expertise, and I was like hearing about you about what it's like to be a published author. So when it comes to the covers, your covers are all so beautiful, the book covers. So how much say do you have over sort of how much say do authors typically have, and how much say did you have over the cover of Bark?
Oh, well, thank you for that question, because this is the cover. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I'm not at home, otherwise, I would have Wagon Purr behind me and I would be able to show you those covers. But they're all beautiful. They're all designed by the same designer, Belle Wuthrish, and I think she's done an amazing job. She works for my publisher, or she did work for my publisher. And so authors don't get to choose the title of their book, which surprises a lot of people. And they don't get to choose the cover because that's the publisher's job, and the publisher is the one who is spending the money on publishing it, so that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really lucky because I think my publisher, Greystone Books, is excellent. I have a really good working relationship with them. So with this particular cover, because I've written in the past about some of the issues, health issues faced by dogs with flat faces, I didn't want a dog that would be on one of those lists of breeds that you shouldn't use in advertising because the face is too flat. So I sent a list from British Veterinary Association to my publisher so that they would have a list of breeds not to include, and they were very, very happy to do that because obviously they wanted a cover that fits with the books that I write. And they actually sent me back three covers, and I shared them with my agent. I have an amazing agent, Fiona Kenshole, and she's brilliant too. So she looked at the covers as well, and we talked about them. And they actually all were gorgeous. They all were absolutely gorgeous. And this one, my agent thought was best, and my publisher thought was best. And I was like, I love all of these dogs. They're all gorgeous. Three very different dogs, but all gorgeous. And so, yeah, and so I said, yes, any of them will do, but this one probably is the best. And it's the one that the publisher thought was best and went with. And I feel so lucky to have such great covers. And authors don't always get to choose. So I know stories of authors being sent covers that they really don't like. And the thing is, if you don't like it, you do actually need to have a good reason. Like, you can't just say, I don't like it. You have to say, that won't work with the book, or that won't work for commercial reasons because my readers wouldn't like it. And that's really what matters, because you want a book that is going to make people want to pick it up. And I'm very lucky with this. I think it does make people want to pick it up. So I didn't want a dog with snarling teeth and so on, because the book is about helping dogs to feel safe. So I didn't want a picture of a dog that was in an unsafe situation on the cover. And that also is something that Greystone took into account. So yeah, I feel incredibly lucky.
Yeah, it is. It's a great cover. And I love how it feels like a series with your other books too.
Yes,
Like
yes, it
this
works
is,
really well. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so back to language. Canadians, Americans, and you know I'm Canadian, and you are a. Would you call yourself a naturalized Canadian? How do you self-refer?
Well, I'm British and I'm hoping to become officially Canadian before too long, but I'm still waiting to hear back. So we'll see. British and Canadian. But
Okay.
I still speak British English, even though my accent has changed a bit. I mostly use Canadian words now, but there are still some times when I confuse people.
Right, okay. So Canadians, Americans, and those from the mother country, which is how I like to refer to the UK. All speak slightly different English. I mean, we can all understand each other really well, I think, but we do, you can tell based on somebody's word choice and sometimes even grammatical structure, you know, probably about where somebody's from. So I always enjoy it when you post in the Academy Writers Group talking about word choices and saying, what does this, you know, so people from Canada and the US, what does this phrase make you think of? Like, how do you understand it? So I think it's really interesting to consider the differences. So what can you tell us? Because you're writing, I assume the book is the same in all the different countries. And it's not just the spelling thing, like obviously there is a slight spelling difference between Canadian and American English, but it's turns of phrase as well. It's not just spelling. So how can you so I want to hear you talk about how you handle those differences without, you know, without sort of jumping into one camp or another. Like how do you make sure that people don't get upset? How do you honor the differences between the way that we speak and the phrases that we choose?
Yeah, so I mean, the book is published in the US, Canada, and the UK, and there are moments when I'm speaking British English. My editor, I've got a wonderful editor, she's Canadian, and the copy editors have been Canadian. So there have been moments where we've been thinking, well, is this how an American would describe this? Does this language work for everybody or not? And I've been really lucky because I've been able to go and ask questions in our writers group. And actually, I've been surprised by how much discussion it sometimes generated, where I've said, what does this word mean to you? And people have given responses that have surprised me. So I thought, oh, it's a good job I asked. And just to give an example, there's a section in the book about dealing with sound sensitivities and the suggestion of putting something in the tumble dryer or the washing machine to make a kind of noise to help to drown out other sounds. And I would say it's to put a trainer in there, but this turns out to mostly mean dog trainer to a lot of people, and that would not be right, of course. So this one actually led to quite a big discussion about trainer, tennis shoe, sneaker, shoe, plimsoll, whatever would be the right word. And in the end, we settled on sneaker as being the correct word. But you know, to make everybody understand, to try and use language that everybody can understand, it's really important. And yeah, because I'm very aware that because I speak British English, sometimes there are times when I use the wrong word, or obviously when speaking the wrong pronunciation, that can confuse people, and you want everything to work for as many people as possible. So that sometimes leads to quite long discussions, and you never would think that people would spend so much time just on one specific word, but sometimes many people have thought about which specific word something should be. So yeah.
So the last question before you do your reading is about this is about future events. So this event, which is the last in a series of Barkfest events, which are about books, and it has been sort of this wonderful sort of coming together of all these different authors who are talking about their process in writing and you know what they like writing about and how they sort of enjoy animals and all of this. So can you tell us about this event was actually full, which I think is amazing, and I, I know you feel really blessed too. So can you tell us about your other upcoming events about your book, Bark?
Yeah, I've been amazed that this event filled up to I mean, my license is for 500. That's how many people could sign up. Some of the other Barkfest events filled up too. It's been really amazing to talk about all of these books, but I have quite a few events coming up, and we posted those links in the chat at the beginning, and we'll put them in again. So that includes for anyone who happens to be near Vancouver, BC. I'm in Maple Ridge. I'll be having a book launch in Maple Ridge on the 5th of October, which you are all invited to at Black Bomb Books from 12 until 2 if you want to come. The details are on my website. Details of all of these events are on my website. But I also have some upcoming webinars for the Pet Professional Guild. So those are more for people who want to learn from the dog training side of things. You can get CEUs if you want to. So they will be suitable for anyone to come to, but they're more aimed at dog trainers, and kind of it's a proper like slideshow and things like that. I've got an upcoming Facebook Live with Dog Kind, which you can find the details of on my website as well. And I've also got an upcoming talk for Toronto Public Library, which again, it's a slideshow, lots of cute dog photos. This one's aimed very much at the general public. And even though it's in Toronto, it's online, so anyone can sign up for that too. And I will have some other events which we'll be able to share details of soon. So it's worth keeping an eye on my email list or my website if you want to come to any future events.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do your reading now, and I will go off camera.
Okay, thank you. So this is from near the end of Bark. It's about lessons learned. It was one of those super bright days in August with temperatures in the low 30s, around 90 Fahrenheit, and it was ages since we'd had rain. I was walking up the driveway with Pepper, him moving slowly on the grass, me on the gravel beside him. I had on my baseball cap and was looking down when I heard a sudden flap of wings that started nearby and seemed to be incoming. I ducked instinctively, and the flapping seemed right at my head. Then the wing beats became more normal and rhythmic and continued down the driveway. When I dared to raise my head, Pepper was looking up at me with big eyes like, what on earth was that? What indeed? I hadn't seen it coming, and the bird was already in the trees now, out of sight. It wasn't the bird that I'd heard in the moments before the flapping, which was a raven a couple of 100 meters away in the tree. But perhaps I'd been flown at by the juvenile raven that a few weeks earlier I'd seen fly into the forest after its parents, followed by the crunch, crunch, crack of knocking on dry wood, a clumsy flight into the parched forest. Maybe they had now learned to avoid trees, and it was my turn to be flight practice. The experience put me in mind of a time some years earlier when we still had Bodger. Bodger was my Australian shepherd, who was terrified of barred owls. This was a fear we spent several years working on, mostly in the middle of the night when the owl came by and called, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" As we were nearing the top of the driveway, one time in the autumn, when Bodger was already sick, a barred owl flew at us from a tree in my neighbour's yard, apparently taking aim at my hat. We both saw it coming across the street towards us. Bodger leapt barking into the air as high as the leash would allow him, and the owl did a U-turn, so slow that for a split second it seemed poised in midair as if about to fall, before slowly flapping and gaining height and moving to another tree. 4 times in the space of 2 weeks, that young owl flew at me, each time less awkward than the last, until the final time when it swooped silently just over my head and continued on, elegant at last, into the trees behind our house. Working with a fearful dog is kind of like the flight of that teenage owl. At first, it can feel clumsy and awkward, as if you'll never learn all the stuff you need to know, and things might come crashing down at any time. Over time, it becomes a beautiful dance as you and your dog move through the environment, no longer troubled, a team, knowing what to avoid, when to treat, how to spot the tiniest signs of anxiety, all become second nature. And in the end, your dog and you become a perfect pair, each molded to fit the other, attuned to what's needed, and with enough relaxation to love, laugh, and just be together. And that's the reading.
That was lovely. Thank you, Zazie. I'm really enjoying hearing the authors read in their own voice.
Thank you.
So we do have some questions from the audience, and I have some other questions as well for you if we have time at the end. So quite a few of them are questions about specific dog training sort of issues. So James has a young dog under the age of 2 who is reactive on leash. And he asks, he's the same pup who is leash reactive, is occasionally aggressive towards his older female dogs, of whom he has 5. But they will cuddle up with them 5 minutes later or engage in play. They're all cautious around her. How can I help the situation and stop the aggressive episodes?
So I guess it helps. Obviously, I can't give specific advice without knowing a whole lot more information. And I guess one thing to think about is what is happening before what might be causing the aggression within the household dogs. And as for the dogs on the walks, so one thing that can sometimes be the case is sometimes dogs are reactive on leash because actually they're frustrated. So that's one thing for everyone to figure out. If their dog is frustrated on leash, is reactive on leash, sorry, are they frustrated or are they fearful? And if you can't tell, that's something that a dog trainer can help you with. And one of the questions to ask is, what is your dog like when they play with other dogs? Because if they're actually quite good at playing with other dogs, then maybe they're frustrated instead. And the solution is kind of different in those circumstances there. So there are some tips on it in the book. And also I would recommend anytime you're struggling with a dog to try to hire a dog trainer, and be very careful which dog trainer you hire, because dog training is not regulated. So always make sure that you get one who will only use kind, humane and reward-based methods, and that can really help.
Okay. Lovely answer. So the next question is from Terry, and I think it's a question that was asked at a previous session, maybe with Patricia. And so if you're, are you putting all of the Barkfest recorded sessions online at some point, or is that not been decided yet?
I will be putting all of them on YouTube at some point, because I know there were a lot of people who were disappointed that they couldn't get to listen to Dr. Patricia McConnell. That will be the first one that goes up, but there's obviously this has been a lot to organize, so there'll be a bit of a delay before they get on YouTube. But if people are patient, they will see them on my YouTube channel, which is Companion Animal Psychology. And if you in fact go to my blog and make sure that you're signed up, because my email subscribers will be the first to know. So if you're signed up, then you'll see when those go up, and you can watch them on YouTube. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so Terry asks, our puppy mill rescue, Mini Aussie, has been with us for 6 months. He's doing incredibly well overall and has overcome many, many fears, but a huge one remains. He is extremely attached to me and fearful and nervous around others, including my husband. Anything in your books about how to help our pup learn to be comfortable with Papa? It breaks my heart and my husband's.
I bet it does. And this is sadly quite a common situation. And it can often be the case that dogs from rescues or some kind of puppy mill background are more comfortable with women than with men for some reason. And it might simply be that they haven't come across many men like in their previous life. But the most important thing is always for that person to help the dog to feel safe. And what can happen is that they try really hard to make friends with the dog. So they're approaching the dog, or they're trying to pet the dog or do things with the dog. And the dog is like, whoa, I don't like this. And so it makes things worse. So it's really important to concentrate on being safe around the dog, to make sure that you're providing good things for them, but in a way that they feel safe to take them. So if they're a bit nervous of you, don't expect them to come up to get nice treats from your hand, because that might be too scary for them. Throw them across the room or leave them somewhere and then walk away, so that they can get them at a safe distance. And over time, that actually will make quite a big difference. So they do want to get good things from you, but you have to think of ways to deliver those good things that help them to feel safe. And also it can sometimes be a challenge with like just the daily things that have to happen. So think about the dog's routine and ways in which that person can be at a safe distance if needed when those things are happening, or just how can you help the dog to feel safe when that person is there. And that will, over time, it will make a difference.
Yeah, yes. So Sarah asks, any ideas on how to get an anxious, reactive dog to play with toys? He seems to do well when I can walk him, but on days like today when it's raining very hard, and he doesn't like the rain, what can I do to provide exercise and enrichment?
I think a lot of dogs don't like the rain. Pepper is the same. If it's raining, then he's not so keen on our little walks. So that's very common. But you can find things to do in the home. And sometimes with an anxious dog, it can take a while for them to feel safe enough to try things. So you have to make them really low pressure. A new dog can sometimes actually just need to settle in for quite a while before they feel safe enough to play with toys. Some dogs might be frightened of the noises that some toys make even, so then you might want more quiet toys. So I think it can take quite a bit of experimentation to find something that is fun, that your dog will like to do. And this is where tricks training is one of those things that is really fun and quite easy to do, and most dogs will be happy to do something like that. So you can do that as a fun thing for the dog to do. And there are other ideas and suggestions for things in the book too that you you can do. And if you're not sure of how to do them, there are lots of online Zoom classes these days with good trainers that can help you know, have fun with your dog. And we mentioned Erica Beckwith's class that we did for Barkfest, but she does online classes at A Matter of Manners Dog Training. So something like that is a really good idea to do.
Yeah, I think it was in a conversation with Mark Beckhoff. We were talking about just the joy and the usefulness and the utility of watching your dogs and just learning from your dogs about themselves. And this, I'm reminded of this when we're talking about helping a dog play with toys, because I've had dogs who are not toy oriented very much through their lives. Like my dog Timber, who recently passed away, he didn't really play with toys that much, even though we've always just had toys around. But then we got a new puppy at one point in his life, and he was probably, I don't know, maybe like 8 or 9. And our new puppy was very toy oriented. You know, she's a spaniel. She was super into toys all the time. And he started to sort of play with toys. And I think it was kind of like, he wasn't pressured, but he was like, yeah, I guess I'll play with this toy because you're playing with it and I need to steal it from you. And then he started to play with toys by himself. So he sort of like turned into this dog who'd play with toys. So it was really interesting just that it was kind of a life stage thing for him. He was kind of prompted, maybe he reached a point, and then he just took off and he played, he had sort of random object play. So it was really fun. And maybe that leads into Lisa's next question, actually. Can a dog of any age overcome fear with the right training, even if they have a rough past?
There is a huge amount that you can do. So you may not be able to get that dog back to what they might have been if they hadn't had a rough past. There may be activities, for example, that you can't do. I think people can find it really hard to learn that maybe their dog is never going to want to go and sit on a restaurant patio with them, for example, or might not be the kind of dog that likes to go hiking in the woods. But you can find other activities to do instead of that. And if you set things up and do them the right way, you can make a big, big difference. And other things to consider would be whether you should speak to your veterinarian, because for very fearful and anxious dogs, your vet will probably want to prescribe some medications, and they can make a big difference. So, for example, if you have a situation in which you can't do enough to help the dog to feel safe, there are things that have to happen. Well, then meds can help, and they can bring their anxiety down to a level where the training actually will work. So, and I spoke to some veterinarians about that for the book. So there's something about that in there. So that can be really helpful. And the other thing to bear in mind is just always to be aware of potential medical issues that are part of it. So if you've got an adult dog and all of a sudden they're showing some extra fears and anxieties, or their fears and anxieties seem to be generalizing a lot, that would be a situation in which you might want to do a vet check, see if there's something medically wrong, and maybe your vet would want to prescribe some pain relief and see if it makes a difference, for example. So there is always hope that you can make differences, and I think I've written this as a very hopeful book because there's so much that we can do, but at the same time we do have to recognize that sometimes we can't fix everything. So we can move things to make them much, much better, but we aren't necessarily going to be able to fix, in quotes, every dog so that they can go to those busy, noisy places, for example.
Right. Yeah. We can probably make it better, but you may not end up with like the golden retriever of your dreams kind of thing.
Yeah.
So Lisa also asks, what was the most joyful thing to write about in the book, and what was the hardest?
I think the hardest bit was that I had to put something in about the loss of my dog, and then towards the end of writing it, I lost my cat, my cats are also mentioned in the book. So I had to add something just before the book was going to press. It was when we were working on copy edits and we lost Harley, and so I suddenly had to put something in there. That was probably the hardest bit. The most joyful bit, well, I really loved all the people that I got to speak to for the book. That was really fun, really nice to talk to all of them and to be able to include their stories. But also, I just like writing about Pepper. Pepper's gorgeous and he's so cute and he's such a lovely dog. So it was really fun including the stories about Pepper. And there is a Melina story in there too about my cat. So I think the stories of my own pets were the most fun.
I love that answer. And I love how much we're speaking about joy. I mean, you know, it's a literary festival about books about pets, but I think we sort of talked about animal joy in every session, so that's been fun. So
I
Joanne,
think we have. Yeah, we have, and it's been really nice to hear, and it's been great to hear all of the authors being so positive about animal experiences and animals having fun and so on. It's just been a really nice thing, and I think it's been quite joyful for the people attending too, which is really nice. I know I've enjoyed hearing everybody else and hearing all the readings, so very joyful.
Yeah, you've gotten some great emails too by the sounds of it.
I have.
So I think I'm seeing some questions go by in the chat box. So I don't know if we're gonna have time for all the questions, but we will only get to questions that are in the Q&A box because it's easier to manage. So Joanne asks, my pandemic pup used to play with two specific dogs. After one incident when the preferred playmate went after my dog, my girl no longer has any interest at all in playing with other dogs. Unfortunately, she lives with just me and no other human or dog. Right now, she tolerates one dog only. Any suggestions?
Well, one thing is to keep her spending time with that other dog, because obviously if she has a doggy friend, then it's good that she gets to spend time with them. But the other thing about play, which I think is really nice, is there's some research that shows that play between the human and the dog is really important for dogs too. So if you have a dog who does not like to hang out with other dogs, to some extent, in fact, a great extent, you can make up for that by giving them extra play times with you and making more time for them to play with you. So you don't have to worry about putting your dog in a situation with dogs they're not sure of and making them be concerned or worried about that. You can just say, how can I find more ways to play with my dog, and different kinds of ways to play with your dog, and just be silly with your dog and have fun with them. And that can help to fulfill that need. So that, I think that's a really nice finding from some of the research in canine science. So yeah, I think that's very encouraging for people, that playtime with you is just as important. So you can use that to fill that gap.
I love it. And I do play with my dogs as much as I can, so
Of course.
that's good for me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Kamala asks, my dog is reactive and fearful, and I would like to build his confidence more. We do online tricks training, yay, which helps a lot, but he seems very reluctant to initiate anything on his own. He wants to please so badly that he sometimes does something maybe that he may not like just for me. How do I encourage my dog to initiate things?
I would say just pay really careful attention to the dog's body language and make sure that you're concentrating on helping them to feel safe, and then just be patient. So focus on those moments and make sure they really are feeling safe, like you're absolutely certain, because you're good at reading the body language. And if they're not, step in and do something to help them to feel more safe. And then if they do dare to do things, throw them a huge party. So this is where that unanticipated state can come in. For example, if they do show an initiative, have a really big surprise, a really big party for them, make them feel really good that they've done it and you're really happy with it. But you may have to be patient and wait for that moment. You can't really force things. Comes back to what Christie's asked at the beginning about making sure that everyone knows how slowly things have to go. Unfortunately, you have to go at the dog's speed. It can be much slower than we would expect or like.
It sort of reminds me of my journey with my big dog Archer, who didn't play with me, but I've slowly been sort of coaching him to play with me more. And it was a lot of really watching, when I did X, did he do Y? So a lot of, did he respond to that? My other dogs like it when I do this, but Archer didn't. And finally I got to a point where I had all the skills that needed to prompt him to play with me. And now he'll come up to me like doing that rocking horse gait and wagging, which he didn't do as soon as he became an adult. So it has taken a while for sure.
And it is a skill too. Like we're used to talking to cat guardians about how learning to play with your cat is a skill and learning to move the one toy is a skill, but learning to play with a dog is a skill too. And learning to know what your particular individual dog likes, which is not necessarily the same as what previous dogs of yours liked or other dogs that you know. So it really is a skill, and it does take time and practice, and that's okay. Lots of things in life take practice.
Yeah, exactly. It's good to learn new things as an adult. So Deborah asks, suggestions for a dog who is especially reactive in a parked car when he sees a person or dog, other than management.
Yeah, so if you wanted to do some training, when you do training, it's often easier because it's quite technically complex. It's easier to do with a dog trainer who knows what they're doing and who only will use reward-based methods. But so one thing we do in training is what we call desensitization. So we break something down. If there's something that the dog considers to be scary, regardless of whether or not it is. The dog thinks it's scary. We find ways to break that down to make it easier. So that could be things like the person walking past is actually a really, really long way away, or the noise that they're listening is really, really quiet and a long way away, something like that. So you find ways to break that down and then very gradually work on it. So you don't start. So, okay, if you're in the moment and you can't stop something happening, but your dog is suddenly scared, that's where you need your unanticipated steak or the ultimate snack or whatever. Give it to your dog anyway. It's always worth doing ad hoc counter conditioning. That's what we call it, ad hoc, because you've not planned it, but something scary has happened from the dog's perspective. So you always want to make sure that you follow that with this amazing treat. But really, it's better when working on it to break that thing down so it's not actually scary, it's happening at a level that the dog is quite happy with, and then give them those amazing treats. And then you can very gradually work with the person being closer, or the sound being slightly louder, or whatever it is. So yeah, it really, you have to break things down so that you can work on them in gradual increments, and you're always helping the dog to feel safe, whatever point in the training. And sometimes people ask me questions about, okay, so they think they're working with a fearful dog, the dog is going to be exposed to things they're afraid of, how much can I put them through? You're not putting them through anything. You shouldn't be putting them through anything. Everything should be at a level where the dog is comfortable and happy, and you're seeing positive, nice body language, relaxed body language in your dog. So that's the way to work on something like that.
Perfect. So we have a question from Gwen, who asks about activities to alleviate resource guarding of owners. I've been told he is fear aggressive, but my vet and I have realized it is only when I'm around. He shows fears of other people when I'm present. Will your book address resource guarding of the dog guardian? Your reading and story was beautiful.
Oh, thank you. And there is a chapter on resource guarding in the book. And although it focuses more on guarding of objects, it's relevant to guarding of people too. One thing always to be aware of with resource guarding of people is it really resource guarding, or is the dog actually fearful of strangers? Which is often actually the case, that the dog is just afraid of people approaching, and they're comfortable enough to show that when the guardian is present. So it might be actually that you need to be working on fear of strangers. And if you can't disentangle that, again, hire a dog trainer or read the book and see if it helps you with that. But it's worth paying attention to that. And then the same principles that I was just talking about would apply if you're working on fear of strangers. So keeping strangers at a safe distance where the dog feels safe, not letting them approach, and so on, and working on that at a level where the dog feels comfortable. So it can be very slow in the beginning, but usually it speeds up as you go. So yeah.
Perfect. So I think we have 2 questions left. One, I think I can ask you to answer very quickly, and then I'll let this question be the final one. So Eva asks if there is anything in your book about dogs who have a prey drive that's a problem.
No, not particularly, because it's really about dogs being fearful and reactive and shy, and prey drive is not that kind of behavior. So there is a mention of the predatory sequence more in WAG, but not as an issue. So I think the thing is that focus on safety. If there's something that's a problem like that, you need to focus on keeping whatever the prey drive is for, keeping those other animals safe. And there is lots of advice on keeping people safe, so that might be helpful. Yeah.
Right, yeah, it's a tough issue, but there's definitely training protocols that can help that are well within positive reinforcement. So
yeah, there are, but they're not in Bark, because Bark is specifically about the fearful dogs.
Right. Predatory dogs are like, this is awesome.
Yeah, give me it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so for the final question, Marissa says, this festival has been fantastic and undoubtedly an enormous amount of work, which I would agree with, especially for you, Zazie. I have only kind of just read the books and showed up, and I know it must be a humongous amount of work for you. So would you consider holding an annual event?
So many people have been asking me this question right from the very beginning, and some have not even been asking, they have been assuming. So that's wonderful. It's great to know that people have enjoyed Barkfest so much, and I think it really has shown that there is a space for something where authors of books about animals get to talk about those books. At the same time, it's been a huge ton of work, and the Zoom license is very expensive. So I'm going to sit and have a rest and think about it, basically.
I know we've talked about it and we're both like, we're not deciding until we've, had some
No,
space.
Christy's been incredibly helpful. I can't say thank you enough to you, Christy. You've been so brilliant as a co-host, and it's been wonderful, and it's been such a pleasure to do. I see someone saying, "And a book club, please." Well, there is a book club, so if you're on my email list, you will have details of the book club, and you can feel free to join that. That's on Facebook. But another festival like this, for sure, there will be some other kinds of events. But this has been so much work. I need a rest first before I even think about it.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Zazie. I've loved reading these books. I feel like I've learned a ton from the books, and it's been so great to meet some of my heroes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel incredibly lucky to have been able to host this. So I might complain about how much work it is. I feel so lucky to have done it. It's been brilliant from start to finish. It's been wonderful to speak to all of the authors. They've all been absolutely incredible. So big thank you to them. Huge thank you to you, Christy, for being such a wonderful co-host. I could not have had a better co-host. Thank you to my husband for technical help, because we did have technical issues. Thank you to my publisher for some help behind the scenes. Thank you to my agent for always being so wonderful and supportive. And thank you so much to the audience for being so brilliant. And this is Barkfest, so I'm afraid I do have to end with a little plug. The Science of Helping Your Anxious, Fearful or Reactive Dog will be available on Tuesday. You can pre-order it now. It's on discounts on Bookshop and on Amazon at the moment, and your local bookstore will also have it or be able to get it in for you, so you can buy it wherever you like to buy books. I really hope that it will help you if your dog is fearful, anxious or reactive or shy or whatever you prefer to call it. I'm honored by all the good words that people have been saying about it already. I've got some amazing endorsements from people, so I'm thrilled by that. And thank you so much to all of you for your support and for coming today. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.